people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Bumgarner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. Another look, a second look, at His Excellency's lengthy statement he made earlier this week about losing interest in making the Canelo versus Crawford fight, what athletes he'll be working with. He said, just wrapped up an important meeting now with my team, planning for the upcoming fights we will make for this year into the next one. I decided to disregard the Canelo fight as I don't want it anymore. Instead, I will be focusing for the US market with bigger fights, especially for the legend Terence Crawford. Additionally, I will support making fights for Boots, Haney, Shakur, Ortiz, Anderson, Benavidez, Zepeda, and more. Regarding Tszyu, there is something unclear with the communications from his team with our team, so I believe we will reconsider his situation and the rest of the world. Definitely, I am focusing on Riyadh season, Wembley edition 21st of September, AJ versus Dubois, and depending on the results of Riyadh season's opening card, Bivol versus Better Bev on the 12th of October, I will build the card for the rematch of Fury versus Usyk on the 21st of December, and another big card in the first quarter of 2025. Stay tuned, very exciting. So what has a lot of people's attention right now is that Turkey and Canelo don't seem to be getting along. Turkey doesn't have a very high opinion of Canelo, and Canelo doesn't have a high opinion of him. So now you have a lot of emboldened Canelo Alvarez fans who all of a sudden don't like Turkey Alalshikh in spite of what he's done, what he's doing, and what he's trying to do within the sport of boxing. No, they don't like him. Well, I don't know, guys. You can enjoy Canelo versus Berlanga if that's your thing, if that's what gets you excited as a boxing fan. You can do that. As it pertains to the boxers that Turkey Alalshikh mentioned, he mentioned Boots, Jaron Boots Ennis. What can he do for Boots? Montes Stanionis is most in line to become WBA champion when the time comes. Mario Barrios is already WBC champion. Perhaps Turkey Alalshikh can finance a unification match between them, between Boots and one of those fighters. They don't seem otherwise preoccupied with anything. Both Montes Stanionis and Mario Barrios are over there on the PBC side of things, but when you think about it, a unification match between them on the PBC side of things doesn't generate much money. At its very best, that's an undercard fight. Fighting Boots might pay better than them fighting each other. If Turkey Alalshikh can make it worth their while to face Jaron Ennis. He also mentioned Devin Haney. Devin Haney, who up until recently was reigning WBC super lightweight champion. He's now a champion in recess, and it's conceivable when he comes back, he's going to come back as a welterweight. What can he do for Devin? It's a very good question. I suppose he could see about getting him a fight with Mario Barrios, who I just mentioned, for Mario Barrios' WBC title. I suppose he could try to do that. And what about Shakur? Because he also mentioned Shakur. Rumor has it Shakur Stevenson will in fact be facing William Zepeda on the undercard of the upcoming Better Beef versus Bivol show in October. That's what the rumor mill is spinning. Turkey mentioned them both. Right on time for Shakur Stevenson, who still is a network and promotional free agent. He's not with anybody. He's not with Top Rank. He's not with Matchroom. If he's got Turkey as his benefactor, he doesn't really need them. It's good news for Shakur. His Excellency also mentioned Jared Anderson, who's coming off the first loss of his professional boxing career. He was decimated, dismantled by Martin Bakole, as I expected. Can Turkey get this guy back on track? Well, I know that he wants to. But the thing about Turkey is Turkey's not about the soft fights. He's not about the soft matchmaking. When he makes a fight, he wants it to be a good one. We'll see how they decide to match Jared Anderson moving forward. He mentioned David Benavidez. The name of David Benavidez was in the mix. David Benavidez who's said to be sitting out and won't be returning until the end of the year due to injuries?
What can he do for him?
It's a very obvious answer to that question. When the time comes, he can get David, the winner of Better Beef versus Bivol, whoever it ends up being. Now, I have my reservations as to whether or not David really wants the winner of that fight and whether or not that actually happens.
Will he fight them?
But if the question is, what can Turkey do for David? That's what Turkey can do for David. He can get David the winner of that fight if David actually wants the winner of that fight now. I don't think he does, but we'll see.
He mentioned Tszyu.
So, the IBF recently ordered newly crowned IBF champion Bakram Murtazaliev to defend the title against Tszyu after the collapse of what was supposed to be the Erickson lubricant fight, where before he was going to fight in an IBF final eliminator, now he's going to be challenging for the title straight away. I don't think Tim needs help from Turkey with that fight. I feel like No Limit Promotions can make that one happen on their own. Afterwards, if Tim wins, that's where Turkey can help him, because maybe he can try to get him Sebastian Fundora, maybe he can get him Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford is the newly crowned WBA junior middleweight champion. Maybe they could make a unification match between them.
Crawford.
So in spite of the preliminary framework, everything Turkey has done, is doing, and is trying to do within the sport of boxing, seemingly for the boxing fans, there are those out there who choose to stand apart, stand against him, for no reason other than Canelo.
The obsession with Canelo.
I mean, I'm a Canelo Alvarez fan too, but there is a line, there is a limit. So now, because him and Turkey aren't getting along, a good portion of Canelo Alvarez's fans all of a sudden don't like Turkey and don't care what he's doing, no matter how many other fighters it involves, because for them, boxing is all about one guy, just one guy.
Pretty much.
I noticed it almost immediately, that getting things done was easier when he was working with the British fighters, the fighters over there. But as soon as he came to America, he tries to bring Gervonta Davis on board for a Devin Haney fight.
Friction.
He tries to get Canelo Alvarez on board. What?
Friction.
More friction. And I'm sure that he notices it. I'm sure that he sees it. The difference between working with the fighters based out of the UK and working with the fighters based out of the US, there's a lot more friction.
For what you're trying to do and what it costs, you get back a lot less than you do when you're dealing with the British fighters and the British fight fans.
With them, you get more. In the American boxing scene, you get less. When dealing with American fighters and dealing with the American audience, which is a lot more toxic than the British one.
This is ambitious matchmaking.
Pay attention to how the Americans have been faring in these ambitious fights. Emma Williams lost to Hamza Shiraz.
Deontay Wilder lost to Zile Chang.
Jared Anderson lost to Martin Coley.
Paying attention?
The American fighter is oftentimes more egotistical and more boisterous for having delivered less.
And the American boxing fan is often more critical and more demanding
for spending less, because a lot of these bums you see online, they don't pay for anything. They illegally watch these fights on illegal streams.
You know, I knew when Turkey endeavored into America that things were going to get toxic in a way that they weren't before.
With the fighters, some of them, and with the fans.
I knew.
And it used to be worth it in previous eras of boxing that the Americans were always a tough crowd, but they were spending money, whereas now they're not even doing that. So is it really worth it?
Personally, I don't think it is.
And that's just me being honest. Junior middleweight news, a ray of light, a ray of hope for what's supposed to be the PBC's first non-pay-per-view show on Prime. A Twitter user that goes by the name Nacho asked veteran boxing scribe Dan Raphael, so when can we expect the first PBC on Prime non-pay-per-view show? To which Dan responded, now I'm told September for Tszyu from Australia.
That's impromptu.
Impromptu? How do you know?
Well, we've been hearing about the PBC putting out non-pay-per-view shows, regular shows like they used to on Showtime and like they used to on Fox. We've been hearing about that on Prime since January, but they haven't done it yet.
The original story was they would do their first non-pay-per-view show on Prime in June. Then June became August. August became September.
How does that make this impromptu?
Because this wasn't part of their original plan. If their original plan as of January was to do a non-pay-per-view show in June, Well, in January, they wouldn't have known that Tszyu was going to fight Bakram Murtazaliev. They wouldn't have known that his fight would be in Australia.
And so they wouldn't have known that that would be their first non-pay-per-view show on Prime.
Not in January, because in January, he hadn't fought Sebastian Fundora yet, and he hadn't lost to Sebastian Fundora yet.
Bakram Murtazaliev hadn't become IBF champion yet. Thus,
And the IBF's order for Bakram to fight Tszyu, that obviously hadn't come down yet, because that just came down last week. So what this lets you know is that all of this is impromptu. It wasn't planned because it couldn't have been planned.
it's impromptu.
This isn't a sign that Amazon is giving the PBC a budget either. Don't ever be fooled. This is not a sign of that.
Why not?
Because this fight that is reportedly happening in Australia is not happening on the PBC's dime or Amazon's dime. It's happening on No Limit's dime. It's happening on their dollar, their dime.
Really, it's their promotion. The money to do the show and get everything together. It's coming from No Limit, not the PBC and not Amazon.
And it just feels like the PBC and Amazon for Tszyu are kind of useless at this point, because for the rights to the fight going to the PBC and Amazon, you could probably get a little extra change, a little extra money, selling those rights to Top Rank and ESPN or DAZN.
We're not talking about big money. We're not talking about a whole lot of money, but some money as opposed to the nothing you're getting from the PBC and Amazon.
The big fat bag of nothing. If Tszyu can take care of business, beat this guy, and become a two-time junior middleweight champion, Turkey Alalshikh can work his magic on a Tszyu versus Terence Crawford fight for what could be 2 of the 4 major titles at this weight, 3 if Sebastian Fundora vacates the WBO.
And I think he's going to.
Remember that Terence Crawford has been a WBO champion across 3 weight classes. That gives him WBO super champion status, which is what made him Sebastian's mandatory straight away. A WBO super champion has that privilege.
Terence Crawford has that leverage. That leverage over Sebastian.
If you, as WBO champion, don't want to fight him, you ain't got to fight him. But it's going to cost you your WBO title. That will go to Terence.
You can go fight Spence. You can keep swerving Terence so that you can fight a guy that Terence beat up last year.
See ya.
Back to Tim. If Tim takes care of business against Bakram Murtazaliev, becomes IBF champion, he has 2 options for a unification match. 2. Terence Crawford for what could be Terence's WBA and WBO titles, or Sebastian Fundora for his WBC.
Assuming he still has it well into next year, as that's when such a fight would take place. With Terence,
If you fight in September,
and you win, Turkey can make the fight between you and Terence a bit faster than a fight between you and Sebastian could be made, because we don't actually know when Sebastian's coming back.
if you're waiting for Sebastian, you may not get that rematch until well into next year. Whereas if you go with Terence, you can get back out there faster.
The fight will be bigger and more money. You'll be guaranteed more money. It seems to me like Tim wants to make a splash in the American market, like his father did many years ago. Well, a fight with Terence is a bigger fight than a rematch with Sebastian. Sebastian,
You're not going to get but so much money fighting Sebastian.
I mean, that's why his next fight is in Australia, because he didn't get but so much money fighting Sebastian.
He's got to beat Backrub.
It's Bakram.
Backrub Murtazaliev, unbeaten IBF champion. Tim's got to get through him. I think he can.
I think he will. North of junior middle at super middle, Sway of Sway's Universe asked Canelo Alvarez, why is he demanding $200 million to fight David Benavidez? Canelo stated, obviously he's a risk, he's a great fighter, plus he brings to the ring on the night 25 pounds more than me. It's a risk, but I don't care. If the money's right, it can be tomorrow.
So stick a rehydration clause on him.
Like the one that Gervonta Davis stuck on Ryan Garcia alongside a catchweight, like the rehydration clause he stuck on Mario Barrios, many of Canelo Alvarez's biggest critics. just so happen to be Gervonta Davis's fans. And if they're all right with Gervonta sticking weight stipulations on guys,
then Canelo can stick weight stipulations on guys because he's a bigger draw worth a lot more money. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
The next Puerto Rican great isn't Edgar, it's Xander.
What?
And if Canelo Alvarez's critics, who just so happen to be Gervonta Davis's biggest fans, decide to get up in arms about it and their tits about it, exposing their hypocrisy, who cares? Who cares anyway? Those people don't spend any money. That's why Gervonta Davis's last fight didn't sell anything.
Those are bums.
Losers. It was a few months ago that I saw Team Benavidez say that they would be open to a rehydration clause. If that's what it takes to make the fight, then they would do it.
So do it.
And then stick an NDA on David so he can't run to the podcasters whining about it, moaning about it.
Fuck him.
I'm not in a place where I'm going to defend everything Canelo Alvarez says or does. I'm just not. I don't like any fighter that much. I'm a boxing fan first.
These are bad optics.
Even if I think Canelo Alvarez would win the fight, there has to be a fight for him to win it. And the fight that he's having, well, it's not that fight. It's an Edgar Berlanga fight. Edgar Berlanga sucks. I'm not going to pretend that he doesn't just because Canelo decided to fight him.
No.
And then afterwards, what he's planning on doing is an excursion, an exhibition perhaps, in Japan. Something about Canelo Alvarez fighting in Japan later on this year. And what I can only assume is an exhibition of some kind of a novelty fight. None of this excites me.
None of it.
And if nationalism or outright fanboyism is the only reason so many of you have decided to defend whatever he decides to do, I'm not with you.
The fuck?
What do you think? That I spend as much time as I do trashing fanboyism and tribalism from someone else, that I'm going to be okay with yours?
No.
I'm not.
I'm over it.
Seems to me that Canelo Alvarez's fans, they're out of pocket. You don't like Terence Crawford because he wanted to fight Canelo. You don't like Turkey Alalshikh because he wanted to make that fight with Canelo.
I'm over it.
But if I am a fan of Canelo and regularly spend money on all of his fights, there's a line. There's a limit.
I've reached mine.
You haven't, because you've decided to pledge fealty to him and support whatever he decides to do, no matter what he decides to do, even when it's a fight with a hapless hack.
A scrub.
Because Edgar Berlanga isn't cannon fodder for Canelo. Because that's not an easy fight. Who are you trying to kid?
So now, every time I do a video on either Terence Crawford or Turkey Alalshikh, I get some butt-hurt Canelo Alvarez fanboy throwing shade at those guys. And for what?
Because they're trying to make good fights? That makes you mad. Even if I can admit that Turkey could have asked a lot nicer for Canelo Alvarez's time to work with him, that you could have buttered him up the way you've been buttering up all these other guys. You could have done that if you want to work with the guy. At the same time,
Can't castigate him so much for that. All he's trying to do is make good fights.
that's it. Canelo Alvarez demands an estimated $200 million for a Benavidez fight. That's an astronomical number. It is.
You know, where before it was just something he threw out there and just something he said in passing, he has since doubled down on that.
That's an insane number. An insane amount of money to ask for.
It's bad optics.
And ain't nobody on his team paying me to run spin for him. So I gotta be honest. If you're not gonna fight in fights I'm interested in seeing,
Well, I'm not your defense attorney.